All right, this video is to show you about the actual ribbons, the tabs, the movement of the Missal when it comes to the Missal. The Missal comes with certain ribbons which actually have certain spots they're supposed to go in. We actually get instruction from the ordinarian on where these are supposed to go. And I know they've been done differently here, so I'm sorry to give you a shift in your normal pedagogy, your method, and yet we do have ways we do these things. Okay, everything up until this first tab, if you notice the tabs, by the way, are all tabbed bottom up. We start at the bottom, and we work our way up the tabs in the course of the Mass. That's the way it is. With the tabs that Father Bolin had put in here, these, let me move these around. They were 2-inch tabs, which I just cut in half to make 1-inch tabs because they were overlapping each other. It was not real clear to see them. So I did you the favor of cutting them in half so it would be easier to grab, but also I tabbed them down up as opposed to you're used to having them up down, which again, the Missal moves down up. And I also numbered them for you to make it as easy and obvious as possible. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And also encourage you whenever you turn the tabs, not to turn it by the tab. This is how we end up tearing the pages, which aren't all that strong. These leather tabs aren't all that strong. These plastic tabs are also not that strong. So my encouragement to you is whenever you turn something, just to put your finger under there and then use your hand to gently turn the page. It'll work just fine. Occasionally one of you will be trying to turn the page and you'll stick your hand right where I'm reading to turn the page. So you're doing this and I'm still reading this paragraph. Well, it's helpful to avoid that. Either do it from the bottom where you're out of the way or entirely at the top. You can come up here, you can hold the page, put a finger under it, and then whenever I hit the bottom of the page, you'll never be in the way. And you don't have to have terribly long arms to pull that off. You just got to reach over. So that's the beginning of the thing. And then comes the ribbons. Ribbons from the Order of the Mass, which is the first tab at the beginning of the Order of Mass. Everything in front of this is the Sunday proper or major proper, which includes all the Sundays, a few solemnities, but it's all the normal Sunday rhythm. Lent, all the weekdays of Lent are here, that sort of thing is all before that tab. So that's the red major proper tab. That's what that ribbon is for. Again, you don't have to have a ribbon on the first page here because you have a tab for it. It doesn't make sense to put a ribbon where there is a tab already. That's what that one's there for. The green one is for the offertory. I always use Form 2 just because we don't have a very long offertory. So it doesn't make sense to do something very, very long. And then the yellow one is for the preface of the day. In the proper, if you ever look these things up, it actually has in there, in context where it belongs, the preface of the Lord's Day. So it even gives you the page number, makes it nice and friendly. So you can go to page 567 or 576 to 581 right here to see where the page number is. And in fact, on the Trinity Tide, which we're in, it actually gives you multiple choices. So it's usually, and they're actually in order in the very early days. Right after Eucharistic prayer begins the prefaces. So this is preface of the Lord's Day, and we have 3 of them. Preface of God the Father, preface 2 of God the Son, preface 3 of God the Holy Spirit. The same is true for the saints. 620, but there are normal ones like preface of Lent, pre-Lent, Ascension, Joseph, Mary, those things. When you get to page 620, you have 3 prefaces of the saints. And I normally set this, but I'll just tell you why I do what I do. Preface of the saints, preface 1, I typically use for just general saints on the calendar, those who are not religious, not martyrs, just a normal saint. Preface 2 of the saints, because it says, by the way, that they were the chosen vessels of the grace, and there are several generations. So the language sort of mirrors that. In preface 2, it talks about when the obedience of the saints has given them an example of righteousness, because monastics make a vow of obedience. I usually use this one for monastic, religious, that sort of thing. In preface 3 of the saints talks about confessing before the rulers of the world the great name of thy only Son. Their confessing is their martyrdom. So I typically use preface 3 for the martyrs, 2 for religious, and then 1 for saints. But it really doesn't matter. That's just something I do. And then otherwise you have preface of all saints, baptism, all the ritual things. Now, at the end of the full the canon of the Mass, you also have what we call the minor propers. So the proper of saints and holy days. And the proper saints and holy days has 2 ribbons. It has the purple one, and it has the kind of burgundy wine-colored one. The purple one we use for what we call the propers here, typically called the minor propers, although these are also minor propers. Because some saints' days give you the entire thing. Like for St. Benedict, we had an introit, collect, gradual, alleluia, everything. Prayer over the offerings, a full proper, right? But a lot of days, like for example, today, St. Bonaventure. We had Bonaventure. He gave us a collect, a prayer of the offerings, and a post-communion, but it did not give us the other propers. So it tells you from the common of confessors for a bishop or for the common of doctors of the church. I typically take whichever one of those two is rarer. Being a doctor of the church, there are only 37 people in the history of time who've achieved that, whereas there's a lot of bishops and there's a lot of common of confessors. So I would go to 936, 937. Here we are, common of doctors of the church, which is where I would find the introit and everything except, those three things that were there. And in many cases, it's just the collect, like St. Swithin. It just gives you the collect. So you have to get everything else from the minor proper, or the common, right? The common of the church, the common of saints, common of virgins, etc. So that's how what these two ribbons are for. So you will seldom use these on Sundays, although it's possible, because sometimes there's solemnities back here that supersede Sunday, and we would use these ribbons as opposed to the others, which can often be the case, like, for example, of a solemnity of title, St. Thomas Becket. If we did St. Thomas Becket's Day, we would treat it as a solemnity of our church. It could actually replace the Sunday, although because of how St. Thomas Becket falls, it's between Christmas and Mary, Mother of God, and so it cannot be transferred to the following Sunday. But everyone else, Our Lady of Atonement, most other saints, they can move it to the nearest Sunday, whereas we are just stuck between two, not only solemnities, but holy days of obligation. So we don't get to have that latitude. And then finally, the kind of pink one, the rose-colored one, we use for the prayers of the people, intercessions, form 3, which is what we use here, and in fact, most of the ordinariate uses form 3. So that's the movement. So if you're not using these ribbons, I also encourage you, when you if you ever move the book at all, you don't want to tuck these ribbons underneath the book, because then when you go to the prayers of the people, either you can't get the ribbon out, or you got the ribbon out, but the pages won't turn because the pages are being held down by those ribbons. So you always want to have the ribbons loose, even if you're not using them. It's good to have them loose where they're sitting down here, so it doesn't encumber the turning of the prayers, right? All right, so that's just sort of the rhythm of this thing. And then when you get to, again, it goes tabs bottom up. First tab is the introductory. Second tab has the creed, which we would not use on weekdays. It also is the one for the prayers of people. So when you come back from the prayers, that's the tab to come back to. Then you're on to, this one does have it's not a tab for I know it's on the offertory, but it's really meant for the Eucharistic prayer. It's a tab, so that's where we begin the Mass. For sung Masses, I often begin here as opposed to at the preface. And the reason for that is the prefaces do not have the music for the sung part of, the Lord be with us, Lord be with you and with thy spirit, lift up your hearts. That's all on this little section here. So I'll often begin the Mass here and then jump to the preface, which it says there. And sometimes in the Roman canon, we have to come back here for the Sanctus, holy, holy, holy. Whereas if you're in the alternative canon, it actually has its own preface. It also has Sanctus, so you can just jump straight to that. I often use this the alternative Eucharistic prayer, which I know Father Bolin never used, and some priests never use. They like the Roman canon all the time. And yet, it says Eucharistic prayer may be used on Masses on weekdays, Masses with children, and other Masses where pastoral needs suggest it. It is not to be used on Sundays and solemnities. So we have to use the Roman canon on Sundays and solemnities. I typically do so also for feasts, because the feasts are also, most of the names in the feasts are in the Roman canon, so I typically just treat them like solemnities anyways. But otherwise, for weekday prayers, smaller Masses with children, if you went to a nursing home or something like that, you want to use a shorter prayer because, folks want to get to work. They want to get on with their day. They don't need to have a full Sunday service every single day of the week. So, but anyway, it has its own preface. And on common days, Ferry is where it says common preface. I typically use the one that's in the alternative canon because it's nicer, it's longer, whereas the common preface by itself seems to feel like we just stop talking. It's very abrupt the way it cuts off. Anyways, so that's the mode of the thing. So again, Eucharistic prayer, then you're jumping to the preface. It is meet and right and are bound in duty to, so on and so forth. And then you're going to the next tab, which is the Roman canon. And once you're in the canon, now you've got these numbered tabs, which again, most churches don't do this. I'm leaving us here because I know it's part of what you've been doing. It may help you turn pages. I can see a value for it for the moment, and yet the Missal is meant to be used without them. So for now, I'll leave them there just to help you get used to that. And I see a value of it preserving the pages by not, because otherwise the pages turn very yellow from us handling them here. It's better to handle them by the tab. But again, just lift the tab, turn it with your hand, so you're not being too handsy with the pages. All right, then you're working your way up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, prayer, humble access, all the way to the post-communion prayer. All right, I believe that's it for that. I will tell you another tip from me to you is, again, it didn't bother me. I think you guys are doing a fine job of pointing the Missal. You've been doing a good job of that, of keeping me on page by doing kind of 2 fingers down the page. My advice to you, this is my experience, because your fingernails don't leave oil like your palms of your pens do, it's better to do it this way where your fingers or your nails are down. And then whenever you want to move down the page, I know some people try to use like this or kind of doing this thing to kind of walk their way up the Missal. You can also do it with your finger just by putting some resistance. You push your fingers apart and that does it too. But it's helpful to have the bottom finger pointing wherever I need to be. And y'all have been good about that, but again, be careful not to, when we get to the bottom of the page, I'm still reading this paragraph and you don't want to have your hand, like I'm going to turn the page for you. Well, you're also blocking the paragraph, so make sure we don't block the paragraph we're reading. All right, well, I think that's sufficient for what we're doing here. Explains to you the shifts I've made to you in the Missal. Everything's going bottom up. They're also numbered for your convenience. And that's how we move around the Missal. Thank you, men. I appreciate your support.